the parent that I'm working with is really still stuck at viewing the other person through the lens of being their partner and all of the ways that they sort of failed them as a partner and not really looking at them as a parent. And that's one of the things that I really talk to parents about, is separating the partner from the parent. This person, maybe was not the greatest husband or wife to you, but that doesn't make them a bad mother or father, right? And so you have to be able to look at those things and keep those things completely separate. And I also encourage people to be I call it kind of, one of you has to get on the high road first, right? It's very rare that both of you are just going to be sitting up there like, okay, let's do this the right way, let's do this well. One of you is going to have to get on the high road first. And what that looks like is giving what you want back. You know what I mean? Giving the grace that you want back, giving and at first it may feel like you're the only one who's giving, but I think that for both people who want an amicable solution and an amicable relationship, it's going to feel really bad for you to be the one that's constantly being the jerk if this other person is constantly being reasonable and being workable and being flexible with you. So I encourage them to communicate and to communicate as openly as you can. I always say that if you lead with vulnerability, oftentimes it's met with grace, and meeting other people's vulnerability with grace. Again, sort of modeling what you want from them. When I started traveling with our daughter, I would make sure that he had the itinerary of, our flights. And I would call when she was little. I would call or send a text like, hey, we've landed safely. You know what I mean? Did I have to? No. But that's what I would have wanted if he was traveling with her, and it's not about me checking in with him. It's about him knowing that his daughter is safe. And what parent doesn't want to know that their kid is safe, no matter who they're with, right? And so it's those things. And I think it's hard, especially at the beginning when you're really still dealing with a lot of your pain and your own grief, to remember that, this is not just your ex-partner, this is your child's parent, right? And to respect that role and respect the role that person has in your child's life, and not do anything to get in the way of that. And it can be difficult. I mean, I am not saying by any stretch that I was perfect at this or that it was an easy thing to do. And you're going to get it right sometimes, and you're going to get it wrong sometimes, and that's okay too. But just, but striving to do those things, I think, gets you on the high road.
And I love that if people can just reframe their thinking around the parent and the partner, and making sure they're separating those out, and knowing that that parent is wanting to do what's best for their children, and that you want to have that child receive as much love and support as possible. And I like the
Absolutely.
other thing about the initiator. The second point you made is really about the initiator. Like, somebody has to take the high road to say, this is the way we should be considering working together, and that this is about our child, and focusing on what's going to be best for you, and you're going to get back what you put in. I have this great webinar that I do on 6 communication techniques to get you what you want in divorce. And a lot of it has to do with, just like you said, it's about being vulnerable. It's about being compassionate. It's about being accepting and being flexible. And it's also about being assertive in a certain level of way. It's like, it's okay to, be assertive in a supportive environment where you're being friendly about it, but
Right.
also setting boundaries.
Yeah.
And
Healthy boundaries are
healthy
great.
boundaries are great, right?
And you're really having to carve out a new relationship. And I think that's the other piece that people have to remember. Like, you're moving out of this relationship. You knew how to be partners with this person, whatever that looked like, whatever that looked like. But you're still their partner. You're not their romantic partner, but you are still their parenting partner. Yeah. And you really have to think about, okay, what do I want this relationship to look like? Obviously their boundaries in this relationship are going to be different. So be very intentional about creating those, how are we going to communicate? And really kind of for yourself, sitting back and thinking about, what do I want from this person? What do I need from this person to be a good co-parent? And then and thinking about, and maybe even asking them, what do they need from you? What do they want from you, as far as being, if you are able to have that conversation, what does it, asking them, if you were to just describe me as a good co-parent, what would that look like? What would that mean? And then sharing your perspective with that as well. And hopefully that gives you something to shoot for, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was such amazing advice, and yeah, and you don't necessarily always get it right, but you are going to have to be co-parents with this individual for as long as your children live, right? Which is
Yes.
going to be longer than you live.
Right.
So, do you
And
have
that
a
is what
choice?
yes,
You know,
that is
you have a
what
choice. You can have a positive relationship and have it be full of love, or you can be vengeful and unhappy and angry, disappointed and bitter, and then that's on you. That's like
right.
going to be your back nine,
Well,
right?
and
So
but
like,
the other piece of that too is that is thinking about, because everybody's like, oh, I would do anything for my kids. Would you though?
yeah,
Would you though? Because when you're deciding to hold on to that, when you refuse to let go of that, when you refuse to work with this person that you are going to be tied to for the rest of your child's life, you are putting the heaviest burden on them. Because
yep,
think about it. My thought was, I don't want for my daughter on her wedding day, should be the happiest day of her life, to be stressed out because we can't be in the same room. How
yeah,
unfair is that?
yeah,
How unfair is that? And
yeah,
you were the grown-ups. You know what I mean? You were the grown-ups first. You were adults. You should be able to get it together. Like, sometimes sometimes I'm that forward to people. I'm like, get it together. Like,
no, I am too. I am
just
too, and I am so that way. Actually, to be honest, like my ex and I, we eloped because his parents had such a bad relationship, and we just didn't want
right.
these two individuals, you know,
Ruining your day.
ruining our day. Yeah, I mean, and
And that's nothing that you should even have to think about. Like,
I
it's
know, I know. I
you're
remember
parenting
on
your parent at
I
that
know.
point.
I remember on his sister's wedding, and it was like her shower, and I was walking with his mom, and she's continuing to bitch about her ex-husband. And meanwhile, they are both remarried and had been married for 30 years. And I remember turning to her and being like, okay, you got to let this go.
Are we still talking
Are
about
we
this?
still talking about this? This is your daughter's day. Like, just let it go. You've been happily married for 30 years. Like, why are you still holding on to this?
Right. The
Um,
gift that you give your children by being able to have an amicable relationship with their other parent is immeasurable.